Now recognize Mr. Ferguson for 5 minutes to give his opening statement. Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Weber, Mr. Palmer, Ranking Member Tonko, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Fred Ferguson, and I serve as the President and CEO of the American Bus Association. We represent the private motor coach, charter bus, and group travel industries across North America. I'm here to offer support for the Bipartisan Buses Act, sponsored by Subcommittee member Representative Langworthy. There is currently no uniform federal idling standard for commercial passenger vehicles. As a result, states and municipalities have adopted a patchwork of varying local restrictions that interstate operators must navigate daily. The Buses Act would set a uniform idling floor using EPA guidance to promote safety and eliminate this patchwork. This debate is not about whether unnecessary idling should be reduced. Our industry supports cleaner air, newer equipment, lower emissions, and limited idling. The question is whether local governments should be allowed to punish federally regulated passenger carriers for the limited engine operations and the need to keep people safe while complying with federal regulations. A motor coach is not a passenger car. It is a federally regulated commercial passenger vehicle carrying our seniors, students, workers, military personnel, tourists, and people with disabilities. These vehicles rely on engine operation to build air pressure for braking systems, suspension systems, passenger doors, wheelchair lifts, and HVAC to keep passengers and workers comfortable. Federal law requires drivers to conduct pre-trip inspections and confirm the vehicle is safe before it moves. That requires the engine to run, and a sufficient pre-trip inspection can take anywhere from 15 minutes and sometimes more depending on the features of the bus. The Buses Act also supports passengers and employee health. Many modern motor coaches are sealed passenger environments. In extreme heat, cold, or humidity, airflow and cabin temperature are directly connected to passenger and workforce health. This point is not coming just from us or from our passengers. This week, SMART, a union representing professional motor coach operators and transportation workers serving New York City and the greater region, sent a letter raising serious concerns about the operational, workforce, and safety impacts of New York City's idling enforcement framework. In parts of the city, motor coaches face a 0-minute idling rule, and in other parts of the city, they have between 1 and 3 minutes of idling time. Neither reflects the reality of safely placing a federally regulated passenger vehicle into service or promoting safe conditions inside the cabin. Similarly, transit buses, taxi cabs, ride shares, trains, planes, all other movers of people are not subjected to the same idling regime as the private motor coach industry, which calls into question some of the benefits the underlying program may create. New York City's system has also become a bounty program. According to public reporting, the city has paid many individuals over $500,000 per year through its citizen idling complaint program. This program targets the private motor coach industry for doing their job and complying with federally regulated rules. Buses are part of the environmental solution. A full motor coach can remove as many as 35 cars from the road. It reduces congestion, it moves people efficiently, and provides one of the cleanest forms of passenger transportation in the country. According to research, there's less carbon emitted per passenger mile by motor coach than all other forms of mass transportation, including trains, planes, van pools, ferries, and even transit buses. Lastly, buses bring business. Motor coach travel generates approximately $158 billion in total economic output. We support $50 billion in wages and contribute over $27 billion in taxes to federal, state, and local coffers, a significant contrast with some of the other operators of buses that don't pay any taxes at all. The Buses Act, it's a safety solution. It does not eliminate anti-idling laws, it does not authorize unlimited engine operation, and it does not weaken clean air goals. It establishes a reasonable federal floor while preventing bounty-style enforcement mechanisms tied to bus operations. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
I'm coming back to you. Thank you for being here today. You highlighted the significant investment in technological advances in cleaner equipment than motor coaches now utilize. For instance, you mentioned that, quote, since 2000, nitrogen oxide emissions from motor coaches have declined by approximately 98%, which is a significant industry achievement compared to previous decades. However, certain state regulations, talking about California, now we're going to move over to New York City, for example, continue to alter those very standards that y'all are aiming for. What does the future hold for y'all's industry? That's a Texas word, y'all. What does the future hold for y'all's industry if there's no uniformity found with respect to motor coach emissions?
Well, a modern motor coach, you all may not know, it's a $650,000 piece of equipment, highly technological, highly innovative, and not cheap. And to procure vehicles, to manage your fleet, you need significant capital at your disposal. And to deploy your capital, you need long-term certainty. And what's happened, with CARB in California is different engine model year requirements have gotten out of whack, where we have an EPA standard that requires one set of capital expenditure plannings that California, through some of their regulations, have completely changed. And California, similar with shipping, is a huge market for motor coaches.
Okay, I appreciate that. Madam Chair, I yield back.
And to our panel for testifying. During the Biden administration, we saw unprecedented attacks on consumer choice in vehicles, putting into place emission requirements so stringent that they created de facto electric vehicle mandates. Do you agree that electric vehicle mandates applied to motor coaches would rather further limit transportation options, specifically in rural areas?
I do agree. The running cost for an electric motor coach is about double the cost of a regular motor coach.
And who's going to incur that increased cost?
Well, local business owners and ultimately their customers. And the primary—
Is that going to potentially limit their ability to take a motor coach ride, maybe to get on a coach and come to Washington, D.C.?
Well, you have the kind of the theoretical and the cost, but the reality is operating interstate motor coaches, you're not on a closed loop, you're not in an airport circuit, you're not on even a transit route where charging can be more predictable. When you have 55 passengers in the back and you're stopping for food, where are you going to charge up? And how long is that charging going to take? And how long can your passengers wait as they're trying to get to field trips and school events and sports games? What are they going to do while you're, filling up? So I don't think our industry is anti-electric vehicle. In fact, there's a lot of alternative propulsion technologies that we're interested in. It's all about that lead time of adoption and allowing them—
It's about the cost as well.
Absolutely, and I think costs over time can become more predictable and manageable, but the market needs to dictate those decisions, not
government. Mr. Ferguson, do you agree when jurisdictions like New York and like California impose these mandates that it has an impact across state lines, impeding the ability for what you were just talking about, for motor coach operators to provide that necessary transportation, those sporting event trips, those field trips? Does this impede that?
We've got current research that shows 35% of East Coast motor coach operators, including many in Pennsylvania, are reducing trips into New York City because of the cost of complying with their regulatory regime. On average, it's about $50,000 in new costs that our small businesses are having to either swallow themselves or pass on to their customers.
Mr. Conde, you discussed—
Mr. Ferguson, you brought up some pretty interesting points in your testimony, particularly regarding the challenges of bus operators that they face in places like New York City. Routine operational activities that are needed for passenger safety and even ADA compliance are now being weaponized and expanded through predatory citizen complaint programs, similar to what you just referred to. Mr. Ferguson, what can we do in Congress to ensure that bus operators are not taken advantage of for simply doing their job and working to keep passengers safe?
Well, the Bipartisan Buses Act, which has been spearheaded by Mr. Langworthy and Mr. Gottheimer, is a great place to start. It gives operators the framework to complete their pre-trip safety inspections to allow time to get the systems, the sensors, the lifts, everything up and running as it should, which promotes and encourages safety in the operation of a motor coach, which on average takes about 35 individual cars off the road.
Is this the Bus Idling Act that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Good. It seems to me like some of these oppressive policies stem from our outdated Clean Air Act and may actually lead to less bus travel and put more cars on the road. We could shoot ourselves in the foot, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And we've seen 35% of our operators in the East Coast are reducing trips into New York City because of this idling enforcement program, which, as I stated in my testimony, does not apply to transit or other movers of people such as taxi cabs or ride shares. Only the private motor coach industry is targeted under this program.
Are there any other type of real-world impacts that out-of-touch local anti-idling standards that are having on motor coach operators?
Well, I think the long-term predictability of regulation allows, in the case of the motor coach industry, to see 98% reductions in NOx and other particulate matter. It's happened over a long period of time through public-private partnerships. And so I think the message is predictability, partnerships, being able to understand the rules of the road, allow us to innovate and to use the power of the free market to solve some of these problems. And that's what we've seen thus far. There's a new engine year coming out in 2027 where you're going to see continued improvements in the sustainability and efficiencies of these engines.
I'd like to follow up on your testimony about motor coaches, and in particular there too, this is an important industry in my state. According to the American Bus Association Foundation data, Florida's motor coach industry generates $7.5 billion in economic output and supports 43,000 jobs. Now, of course, we don't have a regulatory system like New York, and it's doubtful that we ever would, particularly in a state like mine where not maintaining a climate-controlled environment can much of the year be very dangerous. But I'm interested in you describing for us what this kind of limitation on idling, what this kind of regulatory burden has, not just on the motor coach operators, but also on the affordability of motor coach service for passengers.
Yeah, it's important to highlight that motor coaches are regulated by the federal government. So the crux of the problem is the federal regulations require operators to do certain things. Doesn't matter if they're in New York or Florida. There's certain baseline things they have to do to promote safety, such as a pre-trip inspection that takes more than 0 minutes, takes more than 1 minute, takes more than 3 minutes, takes about 15 minutes. And in certain localities, we are unable to complete those pre-trip inspections without violating a local ordinance. And so for operators, many of whom are based in New York, and maybe come to Florida or come from Florida and go up to New York, they're crossing state lines, they're going into different jurisdictions. The ability to comply with federal requirements and local requirements is a conflict. And so how do we resolve that? And that's what the Bipartisan Buses Act would do. And ultimately, we are focused on passengers, the drivers, and in the grand scheme of things, taking cars off the road. Because when people are traveling by bus, there's up to 35 less cars, and the innovation in these engines are extremely advanced. And so that is why buses, as was just noted by the Sierra Club, are the most sustainable way of traveling in mass transportation.
That's an important point for us to highlight about your testimony, is that while certainly it illuminates the challenge of an overly burdensome regulatory landscape, both for industry and for passengers, you also have highlighted that we are undermining an industry that supports good, clean transportation methods at the same time. Isn't that right?
And the reality is, operators who are having to comply with the New York example, they're based in New York, but they're also based in Florida. And when dollars are going to fines and to pay the Citizen Bounty program, that's fewer investments in their own workforce. Academy Bus is a great example where in one day in New York, they had $120,000 in fines, and they're a great operator from New York all the way down to Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. We welcome them in Florida. Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick because we got to go vote. But my wife and I have 2 kids. They're 14, 16. They use the public transit system now. But obviously, when they were younger, I guess not obviously, but they used a private, the company that worked with the school district. So they've been on both. And the idling question is, one that I think about in the context of my kids and everyone else's kids, right? And we want to make sure that we're being smart about these policies. And so I appreciate the bipartisan hearing. Hopefully we get to a bipartisan place. These buses are, for the most part, diesel engines. And you got kids sitting on the buses, including mine. And the time in which the bus is idling, they are breathing in the air. And so the idling rules, Mr. Ferguson, you represent these bus companies. You'd agree that the idling rules are good.
Yeah,
Like, generally speaking.
Operators do not want their drivers idling endlessly, because that's also money going
Correct.
out the door as well.
Right, it's more fuel, also bad, in terms of the asthma. I mean, it just costs riders more, and it costs families more. A kid with asthma, it's very expensive. It's also heartbreaking. And then, the school districts, they pay more. The question is like, are these idling laws extreme, or are they putting folks out of business? And this isn't a leading question, I swear. Mm-hmm. Do you have companies in some of these states that you're frustrated with, where bus companies are going out of business, or it's becoming too expensive?
It's becoming an operational challenge for the driver, because the question becomes, do I pay attention to the federal regulation that requires this, or do I follow the state ordinance which requires that?
But it's not that complicated, because they just do the state, right? I mean, whatever requires them to idle less, that's what they're going to do, no?
In the case of the federal regulation, their operating status, their ability to operate is granted by the feds. And if they're doing things that harm their federal compliance, that could jeopardize their long-term future as an operator.
Yeah.
So it's clarity is what we're looking for. And unlimited idling, as I said in my testimony, is not
Very
what
bad.
we're here to
We
have.
don't want to do that. And it does seem to me that the choice would be I'm going to idle less because, one, it's better for my own health, it's better for my company, it's better for the kids, and I suspect that's where most of them are. But there's no companies going out of business because of this.
What's happening is fewer trips. In the case of New York, fewer companies going into New York, and the cost of compliance is going up. And so I think taken against the basket of higher diesel costs, higher insurance costs, all of those collection of hits, that could absolutely put companies out of business.
But they haven't yet. No one's gone out of business yet. I hear what you're saying, but this isn't